All right, everybody. Well, we are here to talk for 20 minutes about streaming fraud. So, I thought it was great that, Vic ended his conversation on that. So we'll start up with that in a second. But first, a couple of things. I'd like to congratulate All That Matters on its 20th year. It's wonderful to be a part of it. And before we get started, what I'd like to do is just ask everybody a couple of quick questions, and I can see a show of hands. First thing is, are you aware of streaming fraud as an issue? Raise your hand. Okay, a good bunch of the audience. Second question, how many of you are artists that are in the room? Okay, not a lot. How many of you are either labels or publishers? Okay. How about distributors, DSPs? Okay, this gives us a little bit of an idea of who we have in the room and where we're at. So, Morgan, what I'd like to do now is, just get into some of the issues around streaming fraud and what you are doing as your mission to provide everyone here and the industry itself with tools and solutions that can help us combat streaming fraud and maximize our revenue recovery.
Awesome. Well, Mark, first of all, thank you for doing this. Everybody, thank you for being here. To Jasper, Sheila, Roxy, the whole branded team, 20 years, pretty impressive. I hope there's at least 20 more. And I've got to comment on the last panel, because as a Canadian, I also didn't know that Jordan was bigger than Celine Dion.
Amazing.
Which is unbelievable. Yeah. So hat tip to NetEase. Beatdapp is in the business of finding fraud. There's lots of ways to explain what we do, but at its core, we want to be a partner to every stakeholder in the streaming value chain, whether it's labels, artists, distributors, collection societies, or streaming services, to help them root out what I think of as effectively a tax on legitimate artists' careers. And Vic, in the 2 panels ago, sort of talked about at the end of his session all of the things that make it hard to collect the rightfully earned income for independent artists, for major label artists, and everybody in between. Fraud is yet another one of those fees or taxes that's levied, often unknowingly, on creators. And it's really hard to make a living in this business. So when we set out to build Beatdapp and the platform of tools that we offer our partners, what we were really thinking about is, can we make sure that every artist who is doing things the right way, trying to build a career, big or small, isn't punished by bad actors who come into our space and look to arbitrage the very tools that we've used to further creativity for financial rewards, ill-begotten financial rewards, but financial rewards nonetheless.
It's such a big issue for everybody that knows about streaming fraud. It's something that I think all of us have heard of. But why don't you give us an idea of what the scale is of streaming fraud in our business and what that's doing to people's careers and people's companies?
This is everybody's favorite question. And I think my answer is sometimes a bit of a letdown, but it shouldn't be. It depends. It depends on the platform. It depends on the market. But in some ways, it matters how big the problem is. But I think whether it settles between 2 and 5% at the low end or 10 plus at the high end, when you think of every point of market share in the streaming economy is worth about $200 million US and growing today. If it's a 2% problem, it's a $400 million a year problem for artists. If it's a 10% problem, it's a $2 billion problem. I think it settles out somewhere near the higher end of that, 8 to 10%. But we've seen platforms where their fraud rate is north of 40% before we started working with them, and we've seen platforms where it's sitting around 2. And so it depends on the market, it depends on the platform, it depends on the existing, countermeasures they've put in place. But one of the things I'm sure we'll talk about today is keeping pace with technology isn't just important for, promotional and, artist development standpoint. It's also important for security, because the most adaptive, resilient, creative, interesting people, adjacent our industry are the criminals who are working on fraud schemes to, take money from artists.
When you say that it's 8 to 10%, that's a huge percentage. It's a huge percentage of the industry's revenue from streaming in general. And I guess following on to what you said, what are the tools, that people can employ in order to, with Beatdapp and also through other tools and methods that they can use to reduce fraud?
So I'm going to zoom out for a second from music altogether before we come back to what we do as an industry, because sometimes I think when you're confronting a challenge that's a little bit unknown, a little mysterious, it's overwhelming in a lot of ways to think, how are we going to design solutions from whole cloth to combat this? And we don't have to. The good news is, good news is a funny way of framing it, fraud isn't just a music problem. Fraud is a tale as old as time. Certainly as long as people have been finding ways to make money on the internet, people have been finding ways to steal money on the internet. And so we get the benefit as an industry of standing on the shoulders of some giants in this space and adapting the best practices they've taken in their verticals to the unique attributes that make music a little bit different and uniquely vulnerable as well. So just two quick examples. If you go back to the beginning of the Google platform and their AdWords product, a dear friend of mine was the product manager at Google at the time when they launched that service. And over a weekend, he came in and showed his bosses that it was really easy with clicks created by bots to defraud the AdWords product. And overnight, he became the head of trust and safety for the AdWords product, which became a multi-billion-dollar product for Google. So this is 20 plus years ago. He was thinking about click fraud, which is very similar to spin fraud on a streaming service. Just last year, JP Morgan, who is the CEO of Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO of JP Morgan, announced that they had a 2,000-person AI task force with 900 data scientists on it, and the first and most important priority was combating fraud. I say all that to say that there are tools and tactics and techniques that have been well established by other industries facing similar challenges that we can adapt. So when we've gone out and thought about how to build Beatdapp and how to protect our partners, yes, we're looking to learn from what's unique about music, but we're also drawing on other industries' best practices to make sure that music gets the same level of protection that other bigger, more established, and longer suffering industries have dealt with.
So I wanted to ask you a question, just to step back a little bit, to zoom out. For people who have heard about streaming fraud, we've talked about how we can protect things. We're also, I think, going to get into a couple of empirical examples. But I'd like you to tell us, what is streaming fraud? How does it work? How does somebody go, okay, I'm going to put a bunch of AI songs on Spotify and name them Celine Dion. That's at least the thought I have in my head of how it works. But how does it actually work?
We're all going to be listening to My Heart Will Go On tonight.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk a little bit about how it works tactically and then also the motivations for it. And maybe motivation is the better place to start. I think there's two reasons why someone engages in this. The bigger reason, the one that we see, and this is empirical based on, we looked at about 6 trillion streams last year, about 65 trillion data points associated with them. We have a pretty good sense of why folks are engaging in this. Mm-hmm. And the overwhelming majority of what we see is financially motivated fraud.
Right.
So on a DSP, that looks like loading music onto the platform and then running either a sizable bot farm or stealing legitimate users' accounts, adding devices to those accounts and running them unbeknownst to the user, which is a huge problem and presents all kinds of sort of cybersecurity issues above and beyond streaming fraud. So you're loading music on, you're taking control of or creating accounts that can play that music, and you're trying to stream it as many times as possible in as sophisticated of a way as possible without getting noticed by the platform. And that's the cat and mouse game. So, go back to 2015, 16, you might be seeing people who just loaded music on and had bots playing the same song for 31 seconds at a time, and no one realized it.
Right.
Those days are gone. Last year, we found a bot farm that was operating on tablets that are only issued to prisoners in US prisons under the Department of Corrections. There are much more sophisticated ways of running these schemes now than just having a bot farm playing 31-second songs. So that's the DSP example, and that's the financial motivation. The other motivation, and the one that I was afraid, honestly, when we started the business, would be the problem, and I'm awfully thankful it isn't, is the perception motivation. So that is, I would like to appear more successful than I am, and therefore I'm going to have bots or stolen accounts play my song. I'm going to trick the algorithms into putting me onto playlists and giving me organic distribution. Mm-hmm. I'm going to chart higher, and that has all kinds of knock-on attendant benefits for an artist. There is some of that, no doubt. Right. We see that occasionally, but it's kind of the outlier that proves the rule. It's so much more common, 85, 90% of what we see is financially motivated, that I think is a sort of takeaway for the industry, and this is one of those rare issues where everybody can be on the same side of the table. Unless you are in the business of fraud, which hopefully no one in this room is, but if you are, please come talk to me after. If you are not in the business of engaging actively in fraud, you want to stamp this issue out.
Yeah.
There aren't that many of those issues in music, right? We're on the opposite sides of a lot of things depending on which part of the industry you're in. On fraud, we're on the same side. And because of that, we can vigorously pursue the financially motivated, and we can also make sure that we make examples of the perception motivated if and when they get caught.
Excellent. Okay, that gives everybody, I think, a really good idea of what's happening now. So give us some empirical examples of how you're combating this.
So there's a couple of ways I think that are important. One is obviously from a DSP perspective, again, we're recommending at the end of every month or giving our clients at the end of every month the list of tracks, or specific down to the track level, down to the stream level, who should and should not get paid at the end of that month based on fraudulent behavior that we've detected. This, at the beginning of when we started the business, we realized was put us in an interesting position in that it's a lot of responsibility to say who gets paid and who doesn't. And as a vendor, as a third party who isn't directly engaged in each of those transactions and ultimately doesn't have the relationship with the customer, we wanted to find a way to put some skin in the game ourselves. And so we worked really hard with an insurance provider to have our errors and omissions coverage actually backstop our clients against loss in the event that we're wrong. Thankfully, that policy hasn't been tested. I don't think it's going to be. But we put it there because we know that we're telling our clients, don't pay somebody.
Right.
If we're wrong, if they're wrong, and that comes out later in an audit, that's a problem. So we do that for DSPs. We tell them end of every month. We also, on a daily basis, tell them which accounts we detect are bots and which accounts are stolen. And that's sort of a rolling 7-day look-back window based on the models. So every day we're telling them, here's the cohort of accounts we think are suspicious for various reasons. It's then your choice what you want to do with them. It takes on average like 4 to 5 months for a bot farm operator who's even paying for premium accounts on a platform to realize they've been demonetized. So I always say to DSPs, like, let them keep paying. We're demonetizing them anyway. You might as well take the revenue until these fraudsters realize they've been had.
Yeah.
On the account theft side, it's really important to reset those users' passwords as quickly as you detect it, get the fraudster off of the credential, and return it rightfully to the person who it belongs to. So those are a couple of tactical things we do. The third thing that we've started doing, and this is really dependent on the platform, is recommending which content should be removed. So in a world of, and I think I'm very bullish on AI. I mean, we're a business that's foundationally machine learning based. I'm very bullish on AI, but there is a lot of slop, and a lot of the AI songs that are created are used in these schemes. So we started recommending, here's a list of content that meets certain very conservative, very restrictive thresholds that we've designed to ensure they're not punitive to legitimate artists and to ensure that they don't have false positives sort of buried in them. Here's a list of recommendations for tracks you should pull off the platform at the end of every month. For the platforms we've seen adopt that, 2 things have happened. 1, their fraud rate has plummeted, and 2, we've seen market share amongst certain independent distribution businesses really rebalance where, at some points there were platforms, I'm not gonna pick on anybody or name anyone specifically, but there were distribution platforms where 90% of their spins in a given month were being detected as fraud. Wow. When you pull that content off the platform, it puts the burden on them not to re-upload it. Obviously, it's been kicked off once. The market share corrects back down to the level that it should be. And the good news is those percentage points get redistributed to all the legitimate artists on the platform. So that's in a DSP context. We've also started working a lot in the collection society space, so dealing with claims fraud, which kind of comes in 2 flavors. One that I think is just, as bad actors get more comfortable working in an industry, they start to learn the peculiarities of it. One of the things we've seen is that certain fraudsters have started claiming their works in various portals and societies around the world. And so we're detecting in conjunction with the streaming data and the claims behavior data of those registrants who those fraudsters are and blocking them from getting paid. And we've also started building models just to look at the behavior of people who come onto, say, like an MLC platform or a sound exchange platform or others, and just make claims against works that aren't theirs. And so trying to prevent that form of, it's another form of fraud. It's different than what I've defined as streaming fraud, but still, it's a way of taking money. It's the tax being levied on creators. So those are 2 places where we, sort of tactically deploy different strategies to address fraud, and what we see is a combination of demonetization and content takedowns being the most effective, sustainable, long-term deterrent from committing fraud.
And employing these tactics and these strategies has allowed you to, whether it's 15% or 10% or 90%, pretty much eliminate I wouldn't say totally, but pretty much eliminate the fraud that was happening before Beatdapp got involved with these companies.
Yeah, on the platforms that we work with.
That's excellent. And okay, so I've got a couple of more big questions for you in the next 5 minutes. First question is, who are some of the people that you work with? Like, give us an idea of some of the companies that people may know about right now.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a couple, Sound Exchange, the Mechanical Licensing Collective.
Right.
You know, I'm here because I think we've grown our business in North America and Europe over the last number of years. We're particularly keen to continue growing in the Asian market. And I think for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, is, you know, the NetEase presentation illustrated, there is a massive growing, you know, online community of music lovers here and artists here who are building their careers, and they deserve the same protections that anybody else is being afforded anywhere else in the industry. And the second is there's a really resilient local DSP market here.
Yeah.
So you look at, you know, South Korea, Japan, even India, China certainly, they have local streaming services that are successful, thriving, growing year over year, and we'd love to be able to work with them. So, you know, our focus over the next year will be to spend more time in this market and getting to know the players and hopefully being able to bring some of them on board and use the proof points that we have with other DSPs back home to illustrate why, if you're thinking about building or buying these types of solutions, buying is both the efficient and economical choice, and gives you the ability to leverage the know-how that we've, you know, accumulated over the last 5-6 years fighting this problem for the benefit of your users and your rights holder partners.
Excellent. So if companies want to engage, obviously they can meet you after this panel, but, you know, what are some of the ways that, you know, if people want to work with Beatdapp, what are some of the next steps that they would take?
You can call. We take calls, so you can email me. You can go on the website, and I should actually take this opportunity to say a couple of things about what you'll see on the site and from us in the next couple of months. So I should have named this as a nod to Jasper's naming convention for everything, Trust Matters, instead of streaming integrity.
Yep.
Because truthfully, this whole panel is about trust. And we've realized over the last couple of years that streaming fraud is but one part of the sort of trust and safety stack that music companies need to thrive. And so we're going to be launching what we're calling the Beatdapp Trust and Safety Operating System. You can think of it as like an integrated set of solutions for all of these problems. So anomaly detection, fraud detection is at the core. But something else that we've seen is really important is the ability to do know your customer and do anti-money laundering protection at particularly the distributor level. But, you know, labels also see this with their clients. Collection societies certainly do with theirs. We're partnering with one of the most interesting KYC and anti-money laundering services in the world to bring this to music. They're currently the vendor that works with Sotheby's and Christie's in the fine art auction market. And the reason we chose them is twofold. One, when we looked at the existing market for KYC, it was a lot of like, take a selfie, hold up an ID. That's fine, it's good to know that you are who you say you are. But if we're talking about money laundering, which we think is something that's sort of tied part and parcel with streaming fraud, you actually want to know the ultimate beneficial owner of the funds, or of the entities that are going to be receiving the funds from your platform. And so what Arcarta, who's our partner on this, does is they tie that liveness check to all of the financial information and all of the entity registration information of new customers, and they do it in a really elegant way. They also create a living record, so if you sign up one time and go through this flow with us, the next time you sign up for a service that's also working with us, all of that living record is going to transfer with you, and you're not going to have the same friction of, you know, another selfie check, another, you know, royalty, or another administrative flow. So, you know, KYC and anti-money laundering will become a Beatdapp module this fall. Automatic content identification, so think of this as making sure that you have the clearances for the content that you're uploading. That's going to become something that we launch this fall. And then the last thing, which you tell me if I'm torturing a definition under trust here or not, but I think it works, we've developed a recommendation engine. So if you are in the business of recommending content to users, whether it's music or otherwise, one of our clients came to us and asked if we could help rebuild theirs. We did it. We're launching it right now. And I think trusted recommendations is such an important part of the user experience. Being free of fraud in the music context for those recommendations is such an important part of the experience that we're putting all of this together under the operating system so that when you come to us, wherever you are in the industry and wherever you are along that journey of trying to bring more trusted principles to your platform, we will have something for you that will help your users, will help your platform, will help the partners that you license rights from. It doesn't matter where you sit or how far along you are in the sort of the evolution of this, we'll have something for you, which I'm very excited about.
That's really excellent. It's a very useful suite of tools in addition to what you're already doing. And I just want to thank you for sharing with us today, Morgan, everything that Beatdapp is doing to combat streaming fraud and also to make our industry a place where you will be able to make sure that your content is monetized properly.
It's what we're doing it for. I mean, it's for the artists. That's at the end of the day the benefit. I want to thank you for doing this session. Time flies when you're having fun.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, everybody.